Hebrews, the 11th chapter. And this is an amazing chapter, is it not? We call this the Hall of Faith, this chapter, and it's got some wonderful examples in this chapter. In fact, this chapter starts with a description of what faith is. In fact, verse 1 says, "Now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen." Verse 6 elaborates, I believe, on that concept when it says, the Hebrew writer wrote, "And without faith it is impossible to please him. For whoever would draw near to God must believe that he exists, and that he's a rewarder of those who seek him." And throughout this chapter, we have these amazing examples of faith. We have in verse 4, Abel. In verse 5, Enoch. In verse 7, Noah. In verse 8, Abram. In verse 11, Sarah. In verse 17, again, Abram. In verse 20, Isaac. In 21, Jacob. To be followed by Joseph, Moses. And then the people that crossed the Red Sea, Rahab. And then collectively, the people whom this world is not worthy to have had in it. What great examples is laid before us in faith. When I look at that faith chapter, I'm a little intimidated. I'm intimidated by not just the accomplishments, but the faith that those people exhibited. But this morning, we're going to look at 4 points of faith to illustrate the point that these people did great things by paying attention to 4 very small characteristics or attributes. God, thankfully, doesn't expect me to be great. He expects me to be faithful. And these people that we read about in this chapter, I think it's an overlooked point that they did not set out to be great. They set out to be faithful. It was not Abel. It was not Enoch. It was not Moses or Abraham or any of these great leaders that did things amazing, but rather God who worked through them because they're faithful. Can I live up to the example of Joseph? Not likely. Can I put these 4 points that we're going to talk about today into my life? And as verse 6 talked about, draw closer to God? To be in the right relationship with God? I can do it. And I believe that if I can do it, anyone who's here is able to do these 4 points. What is it that we see here in faith? And I appreciate David reading this passage for us, verses 13 through 16. I'll read it again for emphasis point. Speaking of all those people we just talked about, these all died in faith, not having received the things promised, but having seen them and greeted them from afar, and having acknowledged that they were strangers and exiles on the earth. For people who speak thus make it clear that they are seeking a homeland. If they had been thinking of the land from which they had gone out, they would have had opportunity to return. But as it is, they desire a better country, that is, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared for them a city. Again, those great things that these people did, and here we see that God is not ashamed to be called their God. What a statement. What a statement to think about, to envision being spoken of ourselves. Number one, of these great examples of faith, we see that they died being faithful. They were faithful unto death. These all died in the faith. It's significant for me because these men weren't perfect. We could go down through and every one of them listed here. Well, there's not a whole lot said about Abel, but almost every one spoken of here Scripture does not shy away from their mistakes. Some of them rather grievous. Some of them incredible, where we can look at these great leaders and say, not even I would do that. But what made them great is they were in the faith. They continued until the day they died. I think it's important to understand the expectations that God has for you and I. He has realistic expectations. He wants you to be great by being His, but He wants you. That's important. Amanda probably could have done a lot better in life. Picked a lot better spouse, I mean. Better looking, smarter, stronger. Right? But she's picked me. What's her expectation of me? Well, I'm not perfect. And she knows that very, very well. I've always been faithful. I've been there. I remain there for her. That's important. I think it's one of the reasons that Paul in his letter to Ephesians uses the family structure, uses that of marriage to illustrate Christ's example to the church. I can't be perfect, but I can continue. It's what God wants from you. It's heart-aching how many times I hear, speaking of our Christian walk, and when I say hear, I don't mean solely externally, although I hear many other people hear it. I hear it in here. Emily asked me last week about the voices in our heads that I was talking about. I said, I'm talking about our inner dialogue, not a psychotic break, Emily. the things you say to yourself, and in that inner dialogue, say to myself, you're not good enough. You'll never make it. You just don't measure up. It's important that we know that God asked for faithfulness. James 1 and verse 12 says, "Blessed is the man who remains steadfast under trial, for when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life, which God has promised to those who love Him." You know what? It's easy to do what we want to do. It's easy to be there when it's fun. Christian has a car now. Both Amanda and he are in the AV, so they don't have a direct shot at me this morning. Christian has a car now. Man, he spends as much time in Hawthorne as he does in Summerville. I've never once heard him complain. Oh, it's so far away. Oh, I'd rather be doing something else. He's gone. And there's times when it's easy. It's easy to be a Christian when everything's going our way. It's easy to be a Christian when there's no immediate temptation. It's easy to be a Christian when we don't have peer pressure to be the opposite. It's easy to be a good husband when we're having fun and all's going well. James, speaking of our spiritual walk with God, says, "Blessed is man who remains steadfast under trial." There's times in life we're beat down. I believe that it means faithfulness means more when that inner dialogue says, I don't measure up. When that inner dialogue says it would be easier to do wrong. When that inner dialogue says, why do I even bother? No one even notices, let alone acknowledges. That's faithfulness when it's hard, when it's difficult, when it's not easy. Revelation 2 verse 10, Sometimes we talk about the Christian walk, about how difficult it is. And there are difficult aspects to it. In fact, it's in some regards so difficult that I'm never going to measure up. I'm never going to be what I could be, what I should be. But the fact of the matter is, life is difficult. Whether you're a Christian, an atheist, or anything else, life is difficult. These Christians that the book of Revelation were written to were just starting into some horrific persecutions, and it was about to get a whole lot worse. John speaks for God when he says, "Do not fear what you are about to suffer. Behold, the devil is about to throw some of you into prison, that you may be tested, and for 10 days you will have tribulation. Be faithful unto death, and I will give you a crown of life." You know what Mike wants to hear? Fling those prison doors open. I'm walking out of here. At 10 days, speaking of a period of time, for many of these people, what was going to bring that trial, what was going to bring that tribulation to an end was death. Jesus says, keep the faith. Be faithful. And that death, even that death, brings about a beautiful crown. One of the things that's so significant to me about that is I don't have to be more powerful. I don't have to be smarter. I don't have to be better than my adversaries. I just have to be with Jesus. I just have to not quit. The encouragement in this 11th chapter, in fact, the entire book of Hebrews, my encouragement for you today is, I oftentimes need myself, is don't quit. Pursue the walk for as long as you walk. Be faithful unto death. The second thing that we see here again in verse 13 is vision. And it's interesting that down just a little bit in 13 here, we see these people defined as exiles, as strangers, as pilgrims. You want to talk about vision? Can you imagine having the vision to leave your homeland for religious reasons and to get on a big wooden boat with cloth sails to a land you can't see? Mike, I know you do some boating. I enjoy boating for as long as I can see the land. I don't know if I'm in good enough shape to swim as far as I can see, but at least I know what direction to go if I can see it. These people had vision. They left, and they went to another land which they could not see. Notice the similarity or even the greater spiritual implications given about these people of Hebrews, the 11th chapter. These all died having in faith, not having received the things promised, but having seen them and greeted them from afar. One of the things about these people in all these passages that I think is encouraging for you and I is they were looking forward to the Messiah. They were looking forward to the seed that would bless all nations. You and I have the privilege of living in an age and a time where we have that. They pressed forward, seeing it in the future. And you and I need to have the vision to press forward. with vision. Told this story a while ago, but I was in a small shop and there was an Amish gentleman standing next to me some time ago, and I can't remember what took the conversation down this road, but he asked me if my children played video games. And I told him yes. He said, my children don't. Yeah, I was aware of that. But he was getting to a point. He says, do you know why? And I remember thinking, because you don't have electricity, you don't have TV or video games. Those are places I was going. He's saying because those things steal your imagination. Yeah, he's got a point. He's got a point. I wasn't ready for where he went next. He said, and the truth of the matter is that you can't even believe in God without imagination. We need to have a vision. We need to be able to see the unseen. These individuals, they push forward. Again, you know, my desire so often is the here and now. Lord, open that prison door. Lord, fix my problem. Lord, make Amanda be nice. It's her prayer, appropriate prayer, right? It's right here now, fix it for me. These individuals were looking down the road. They were looking around the corner. We need to have this vision as Christians. Understand that what's here now is not our home. It's not the forever. It's not what really counts. The Hebrew writer concludes this thought into the 12th chapter in verse 2. He mentions he talks about the great cloud of witnesses he just described, and then he says this to the Christian, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross. You ever notice that? The joy that was set before him endured the cross. You ever think about joy and the cross together? Not two items that seem very close together, are they? Despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand, or at the right throne of God. Where was the joy? It wasn't in the cross. It was beyond the cross. Jesus had the vision to see you, to see me, to see beyond the trial that he was facing. I need to be faithful until death. I need to have vision. It's able to see through my trials. It's able to see through my problems. It's able to see through the physical of this world. Proverbs 29 and verse 18 says, where there is no vision, the people perish. But he that keepeth the law, happy is he. Use the King James because the word vision is used here. And it fits. The concept of vision is prophetic. It's not about telling the future. It's the law of God. It's speaking for God. Where we can't see God's will in our life, the people perish. But he that keeps the law, happy is he. There's times that our vision can't clearly penetrate the fog of war. But to have the vision of knowing where I'm to be, that I'm to continue, that I am to march, is the vision spoken of in this verse. What about verse 14? Aren't these simple? Vision, pursuit, and yet they are life-changing. Verse 14, for the people who speak thus, make it clear that they are seeking a homeland. Is it clear what I am seeking. It's clear what's important to us, isn't it? Ezra, I enjoy Ezra so much. Chris, I see Ohio State and Penn State are playing, I think, in 2 weeks. We need to get with Ezra to watch that game together. Ezra is coming on Sunday nights and he wears Ohio State fatigue. I saw his mom one day on Sunday night wearing a Penn State sweatshirt. And I said, boy, Tanya, you look good. I gave her $5. I said, I'm happy to reward that kind of behavior. Well, the next week, Ezra showed up with the Penn State sweatshirt on, and he was all about, but he'd tell me, even as I'm paying him, it got me into a situation where I ended up paying him for a few weeks. I was happy to do it just to see him in that blue. I'd say, Ezra, you're a great Penn State fan. No, he'd say. No. Everything about us says something, doesn't it? What does our life speak? What is important? What are we pursuing? These people, their conduct shows that they were pursuing a homeland, a spiritual, a heavenly homeland. James, again, chapter 4, verse 6 through 8 says, but he gives more grace. Therefore it says, God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. You ever wonder how often you get in your own road? How often you make life so much more difficult on yourself than it needs to be? I think about this because I work with horses. And when you're starting a horse, a young horse that doesn't know what to do, there's a lot of training that takes place. But Chris, sometimes a good seasoned horse knows exactly what he's supposed to do, and he just doesn't want to do it. And they take the difficult way out, don't they? And if we as people don't make it difficult for them, they'll never do it again. But some of these horses have just enough fight on them. They will fight, they will fight, they will fight, they will fight. And then you'll see them. They'll just blow out. Big exhale. And then just step right into what they're supposed to do, and off they go. And I think to myself, why? You know I'm going to make you do it. Why do you fight it? And then I think about the mirror, and it gets really painful to think about, Tom. God opposes the proud. Sometimes my biggest struggle, my biggest hindrance. Verse 7 says, submit therefore to God. Resist the devil and he will flee from you. Draw near to God and he will draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. I can have anything I want as long as I don't have 100 opposing ideas or things I want as well. That certainly is what James is talking about with God. If I'm going to draw close to God, I can't be double-minded. I can't seek all the other things that are opposed to God as well. These people pursued his will. I need to pursue, draw close to God. Matthew 6, 19, 21, Jesus talks about some of the competing ideas, right? Some of the things that get us distracted. He says, do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Number of years ago, about 4 or 5 years ago, We were at Mom and Dad's place, and Amanda was on her phone. It was Christmas Eve, and we were all together exchanging some presents and things, and Amanda's on her phone. I said, "What are you doing on your phone?" Eventually, she said, "I'm getting your Christmas present." I just read American Kingpin, which is Ross Albright's story that made Bitcoin popular, noticeable to the public. And I'd been researching Bitcoin because I was curious, but at the time it was in a bit of a bubble. Amanda bought me $200 worth of Bitcoin at $14,000 of Bitcoin. I had just a wee little piece of Bitcoin. I said, "Well, you can't just buy $200 if you're going to buy it." Chris says, "I'll throw a little bit in." We bought $700 worth of Bitcoin at $14,000. In the months that followed, it dropped to $2,000 a Bitcoin. Our $700 for about 2 years' time was worth about $230. Anyone know where Bitcoin is today? $41,000, so it's down a bit. Yeah, this summer it hit $60,000. That puts my $700 at around $3,000. Now, you know what I really wish? I really wish, I mean this in a very lighthearted way, that instead of $700, Tom, we'd put $70,000 into Bitcoin and bought up a whole bunch of Bitcoin. Who knew? I thought I bought it at a bubble. I thought when it was at 2,000, in fact, it was under 2,000, well, at least it wasn't $7,000. Then when it hit $64,000, it's like, wow, wish there was a lot more in there. Now, here's my point. Do you ever say, boy, I wish that was more important to me back then than it was? Imagine getting to the end of our life and say, I never realized how important this issue was or this relationship was. It's oftentimes said that there's no gravestone that reads, I wish I'd spent more time at the office. These people pursued God. To all the people around them, it was foolishness. It was ridiculous. But at the end of their life, it was a grand investment. We need to pursue God. To do that, we have to give some things up. If you would, notice verse 15. If they'd been thinking of that land from which they had gone out, they would have had opportunity to return. Abram was asked to leave his homeland. Where am I going, God? I'll show you. Amanda won't even get in the car with me if that's the kind of answer I give her. Where are we going? I'll show you. I'm not getting in there. You tell me where we're going, then I'll think about getting in. God says to Abraham, leave, and I'll show you where. And the road was twisty, it was bumpy, it was hilly, it was difficult. And had he so decided at any point, he could have turned around and went back. You know, up in the top left there, you see a representation of Lot's wife. Lot's wife being turned to a pillar of salt. I could never understand when I was young why simply turning around was so important. I believe that the issue was Lot's wife didn't want to leave. She wasn't so bothered by what was taking place where she lived. She wasn't so bothered by what her life was that she was willing to give it up to go somewhere else. And this is the case in life, that until we are dissatisfied, till we dislike what we have enough to change, we will always have what we have. Part of these individuals' faithfulness was to give up what they had so they could pursue what was before them. Luke 9 and verse 62, Jesus said unto him, no man having put his hand to the plow and looking back is fit for the kingdom. I always think about mowing, right? You ever see those paths mowing that go this way and that way? Taught Christian when he started to mow, pick something out. Put your eyes on it and go towards it. Forget what's behind you. In 14 and 23 of Luke, we read, and the Lord said unto the servant, go out into the highways and the hedges and compel them to come in, that my house may be filled. For I say unto you that none of those men which were bidden shall taste of my supper. This is a situation where he says, go out and invite the guests. And they're all busy. They all have things to do. They all have more important things. And the representation that Jesus gives is that they missed the greatest feast ever imaginable. In Matthew 16:24, we see of Jesus speaking unto his disciples, if a man will come after me, let him deny himself and take up the cross and follow me. We talk about we talk about abandonment, brethren. You know, sometimes we talk about great sacrifice. But sometimes I've got to ask myself, what is it that I'm clinging to that's so great? What is it that I can do for myself that's so much better than what God has in store for me? This abandonment is not sacrifice, it's self-preservation. Lastly, we see, and maybe the motivational force for all of this, but as it is, they desire a better country, that is a heavenly one. Therefore God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared for them a city. Desire. You know, we all want a better place. We all want our government to do better. We all want, people to be nice. Anyone here want to volunteer to say they don't think that people on the roads need to be a little more nice? No one's going to go there and say, we all say they need to be a little more nice. Do we desire it so much that we are willing to be nice? What these individuals did. They desired a better country and they were going to work for it. They were laying the very foundations for it, the preparations for it. Jesus speaking as told by Matthew of the kingdom says, again, the kingdom is like unto the treasure hid in a field, the which when a man hath found, he hideth and for joy thereof goeth and selleth all that he hath, and buyeth that field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like unto a merchantman seeking godly pearls. And when he had found one pearl of great price, went and sold all that he had and bought it. The fact of the matter is, the kingdom of heaven is not a sacrifice. It's not a price to be paid. It's a reward to be gained. They were faithful to death. They had vision. They were willing to give up what was here. They were willing to pursue God because they had a desire for that kingdom. Brethren, there's nothing before us today that could be more precious, more valuable, more rewarding, more useful, more beautiful in the kingdom of heaven. If you need encouragement in any way, we can pray for you, or if we can help you take the next spiritual steps that are relevant for your life. Or if you in your seat need to make a new dedication or take a step that's relevant for your spiritual walk, I encourage you not to put it off. Heaven, the kingdom of God, is a pearl of great price. If you're subject to the invitation to be part of that kingdom, I encourage you to come forward as together we stand and sing.